welcome back. It's Chala from Crafting Through the Chaos of Life. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be hopping along with Scrap and Stamp Blog Hop, and we're going to be doing some Slimline cards for a change up. And we're looking at the Picket Fence Studio Slimline die cutting system. This is a really great die cutting set. It has so many different options. It says here that you can make 256 different card front combinations, and I'm sure you could probably even do more with the die sets and stamps that you have in your own stash. All right, let's take a look at what this Picket Fence Studio set comes with. It comes with the large rectangle die, then it has the fence, a stitched circle, a grass piece, a little bit larger of a rectangle piece, so you could layer those two together. It has a stitched rectangle, what appears to be, I think, some trees or some tree lines, and then it also has the birch tree trunks here. So this is really going to be fun. I'm really excited about this. So let's go ahead and get started by cutting some of these pieces.
To prepare for this Slimsational blog hop, I've gone ahead and cut out several of these little characters here that I'll be using on many cards, so we're going to need to get started. I have some distress oxides in Lucky Clover and Broken China that I'm going to use to create this scene. I've gone ahead and used the little fence die cut, the grass die cut, as well as the stitched rectangle, and just doing some ink blending, laying lots of color down with my foam distress ink blending brush, as well as using the Picket Fence blush to blend those two colors together. To create the background behind that die cut piece, I'm using the My Favorite Things cloud stencil, and I just flipped it over there to continue the line along. You can see how I do that. Making sure you clean off your stencil though, just so you don't get any unwanted ink transfer. I also brought in some squeezed lemonade. I thought this piece needed a little bit more extra color to brighten it up and not make it look so gloomy, and just using the Picket Fence blending brush on the bottom there. And this will create the beautiful scene in our background of our die cut piece. These Slimline cards have been so much fun, and I almost couldn't stop making them. Alright, so you can see I layer that piece on over top and how fun that looks. Now I bring in some of my little characters. This is from the My Favorite Things Saddle Up and Celebrate stamp set, and this is a really fun one to use. I am going to just simply now adhere all of these pieces together. So you can see I also did the sentiment off screen. I did that howdy friend with some heat embossing. So the panel, I'm just going to simply adhere it down onto our Slimline card, and the measurements for the Slimline card are, I believe it's 8.5 by 7 inches scored at 3.5 inches. So trying to center this, I use the smaller rectangle piece for this panel to die cut, and then when I die cut the other elements, I used some, what did I use? I used some of the washi tape, to hold the die pieces together as I ran it through my die cut machine. So I really want to make sure I get this nice and centered on here, otherwise if it's crooked it kind of ruins the whole look of the card. So I just adhere that down with my tape runner, and now what I want to do is I think I want to pop this up. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in some foam tape, some little foam squares. Now I use a ton of these. I kind of got a little overboard and I didn't want to have a saggy panel because there's nothing worse than having a saggy panel. So I won't bore you with adhering all of these down, but I do adhere a boatload of these little squares to the back, and then I will adhere that to the top panel of our cloud panel that we have on our card base. Now that I have all those little release papers pulled off, I can adhere this down onto our ink blended cloud piece, being very careful to try and line it up perfectly, and then I'll just press it down. And once I have this adhered down, I can go ahead and start bringing in our little images to build up our scene. So I wanted the little cowgirl to be on the left. I wanted her to kind of look like she was leaning against the fence. I knew I wanted my sentiment to be in the middle, so I will pop that up again with some more foam adhesive because I was really addicted to these at this point, again wanting to make sure nothing was saggy. And then I will have my little cowboy character off to the right on the little grassy area. Again, these cards are so much fun to make. Using the Slimline or the Slimline cards really helps if you want to build larger scenes. I find sometimes the A2 cards are limiting when you are trying to build a beautiful scene card. There's only so much of the scene that you can get in there, and especially when a die set or a stamp set has so many great little stamped characters that you want to use. This slimline version of a card really helps you to incorporate a lot more of the image, I find. All right, so I'm just using some liquid adhesive to adhere onto these little characters onto. This gives me some wiggle room to move them around. And the liquid adhesive I'm using, I believe it's the Hero Arts. It's very similar to the Gina K Connect Glue. I like them both. But you know what? Quite honestly, if you don't have any of those, some regular white glue works just as well. Just make sure that when you do put the glue on the back of your little characters, that you're adding a smooth layer. If you use a lot of blobs, it can tend to warp your little image, or you'll be able to see the liquid adhesive in the background. So if you need to, use your finger and smear it along there, and then just apply even pressure to the project for a little while just to make sure that it dries. Or you can put some acrylic blocks on top just to make sure you get good adhesion. I am using another little foam, surprise, surprise, just to pop up her hat a little bit. I didn't want because there's different layers to this card, I didn't want it to kind of bend or fold at all. So I'll do that to their little hats just to make sure that they stay nice and even. And then that pretty much finishes this first card off. I think it turned out really well. I think the scene is super cute and fun, and I can't wait to give this to my friends. I thought a beautiful card like this really needed to have a beautiful envelope, and that's a New Year's resolutions. I want to make sure I create fun envelopes as well for my cards, so I just use that MFT stencil just to create some beautiful clouds. Now I also went ahead and created another one. I couldn't resist. This time just doing it the vertical way instead of horizontal, and again using the same die cut system, the same stamps and the same stencils. And for the envelope, I did the same sort of ink blending, but I also used my Xyron sticker maker and made some of the images into stickers to stick on the front of the envelope. Moving right along into our third card, I am creating this little window front slimline card. And so I've cut two pieces. I've used those two rectangle pieces and the birch square die cut piece from that slimline set. Now, I realize that I do have this upside down right now. This is a card panel that I've trimmed down the top of it because I want the window to peek through. And I have to make sure that it fits underneath and doesn't show through that window. I actually cut it right the first time. It was because I was lining this upside down that I thought I had to give it a little trim. I didn't need to trim it anymore. Just make sure that if you are doing these window pieces that you are making sure that you trim enough of that card front off to make sure it doesn't show underneath or through the window. So I do give it a little trim along the edge here. So after I've gone ahead and done that, I am going to use some really strong score tape and apply it along that edge, and that will make sure that the two pieces that I adhere together are nice and secure, especially when you are opening and closing the card. I highly recommend score tape if you are trying to build up a card and really need a strong adhesive. If you need something just a little stronger than, say, a liquid adhesive, this is definitely my go-to adhesive. It's way stronger than any tape runner that I have ever used. And because I want to make sure that I get this lined up evenly, I'm only going to release half of the paper. This is something I do quite often in building my card bases. It gives me a little bit of time to line everything up perfectly and not have it stick down right away. As you can see there, it was easy for me to lift up and realign to the edge of the card. And then once I have everything lined up exactly where I want it, I can then go ahead and pull off the release paper, the rest of the release paper, and everything is secured perfectly. So you'll see here that I'm making sure that when I fold the card, it is even on both sides, that the edges and corners line up perfectly. That's something that I'm a little neurotic about. I want to make sure everything looks perfectly. And then I can go ahead, grab that and pull it out, and it's exactly where I want it to be adhered. Okay, and then from here we can go ahead and take a look, and you can see that it's adhered down nicely, and we'll put our little craft piece on, and I'm just so thankful that I adhered it properly and not upside down. And for this, I will just actually I just use some regular liquid adhesive to adhere this on. Now that I have that piece adhered down, I start playing around with the little images that I've die cut out to build up my scene. And honestly, I thought that this looked really cute, but I ended up going a very, very different way. I wanted it to be more of a magical look to it, as the sentiment that I'm using is have a magical day, and you can see here that I really just went completely different. I used some colored pencils for inside the little lanterns. I put the image on the inside. I can still write my message to the recipient and it won't be seen in the front, or I could write it on the top of the card there as well. And I just really like that when you open the card you have that cute little scene. Again, I have a little envelope that I did some simple stamping with, but it really gives the envelope a little boost and gives the recipient a little peek into what's inside the card. Now my next card, I will just show you the finished product. I used some of my own oval dies and a stitched square to create this beautiful card for a friend to send off to her. We've been missing each other desperately, and I used some patterned paper. I went ahead and used a circle stencil that I had and masked off a portion where I could put the address to match the backing of that paper, and I just think this is a really fun combination. That stamp set is called, that is the Friends at First Sip from My Favorite Things. My last card here, I'm going to show you quickly how I do some ink blending. So this is going to be an interactive Slimline die card, and again I want some heavy inking on here, so I've used some just some masking paper to mask off the edge to make sure I don't get it off on the back of the card, and I'm using some Faded Jeans Distress Oxide ink. Just to lay down a heavy layer, I'm using the foam blending brushes for this. Again, if I want a really thick layer of ink, I use my foam blending brushes, and if I want a smooth blend between two different colors, that's what I use my picket fence blending brushes. Again, you may be different in what you use or what techniques work best for you, but this is what I found worked best for me. So we'll go ahead and jump ahead and see how I created this card. After I get the ink blending done, I'm going to set that aside to dry. I'm going to get my sentiment all stamped up. I used a stitched cloud die to create the top portion that's going to cover the little element that we're going to be using, and I'm stamping my sentiment with Versa Fine Clair Nocturne ink. This is my favorite, absolute favorite sentiment ink to use, and I'm just using my Stamp Perfect to get a nice even stamp in case I had to stamp it more than once, but I got it perfect the first time. And then I have that element already. You want to make sure you do this before the next portion. Alright, you can see here I've also die cut some grass. That's with the Lawn Fawn meadow borders. I'm just using some liquid adhesive, and I will attach this to my card base. It is a bit bigger than my card base, which is okay. I'm going to trim it down later, not a big deal. I only inked up the portion that we're going to see as well. Now I need to build up the scene. I had originally wanted this grass piece to be the top portion, and I should have done it that way because I'm going to be using the die set called Falling from the Clouds from My Favorite Things, where the beads can fall and look like rain, and they kind of get caught on the grass. So I should have actually adhered that on top of the hill and had the hill adhered down to the panel where the beads slide, but that's okay, it still ends up working. Just something to keep in mind, that if you're using dies like this, I would switch the hill and the grass around. So I have my little element piece from the Falling from the Clouds where the thread is going to go and adhere or get weaved into, weaved into it, and I'm just kind of making sure I line everything up so I can get an idea of where I need to adhere everything down. So that's kind of how my card is going to look in the end. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere some foam tape. This is not my favorite foam tape at all. I just got it off of Amazon because I completely ran out and I needed some in the quick. Definitely spend the money for the 3M kind. I trim it down to fit the size of my card, and I've also trimmed the little thread interactive piece down as well to fit. So what you want to do is you definitely need to use some foam tape for this little element piece, and when you adhere it down, you want to make sure that the little teeth are pointing down on the bottom of your card. So you can see here, here's the little teeth. You want to make sure those are pointing down, because when you weave your thread in, it's going to pull up against it. Now, I cut this from 110-pound cardstock, so that should be sufficient. If you're using anything lighter, I recommend that you die cut 2 of them and glue them together just for the stability. I end up using some invisible thread, or you can use fishing line. If you're using something like that, you want to be careful because it can rip your cardstock if you're not using a heavy enough cardstock. Right, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the top. So I'm going to turn it around just so it's easier to work with. I'm going to trim my foam tape to line up perfectly to the edge of that. Now I do inset it a bit from the top and bottom of the card. I don't want the teeth to be hanging over the edge, so I will put the adhesive just on the inside, just a little bit more than I normally would for a panel of a card. So I'll go ahead and adhere this down, keeping in mind that I want it just set back a bit from the edge of the card, because I don't want those teeth to be touching the exact edge of the adhesive, otherwise I can't get the thread through it. And this release paper is just horrible to get up. Okay, so now I can go ahead and take my teeth again, making sure that they're pointing to the bottom because I've turned my card around. If you're doing it the other way where you're adhering it on the top, then you want to make sure those little teeth are pointing up. Again, so the teeth are making sure that you line that thread up through it, and they have to be facing the right way. So I'm just trimming off the excess portion of the little element there. And then now I have my invisible thread. So this is just some invisible thread that I had in my stash. I think I might have gotten it with a card kit, or I could have gotten it for beading, because I used to do a little bit of beading when I was much younger and my eyes were much better. I have to tell you, I did struggle trying to thread the seed bead needle. Oh my goodness, that was a trial. I obviously can't do beading anymore, that's for sure. So you thread you thread the thread through the little teeth, and I adhere it with some nice strong score tape, and then I'm going to go ahead and thread up the needle. And this was again a very painful process, so I'm not going to make you watch this. Once I get that needle threaded, I can go ahead and pick up the little seed beads. Now I have some clear and kind of champagne colored ones, and then off to the right there you can see I have some kind of greeny and blue ones. So I pick up around 8 to 10. You just want to keep in mind that whatever element you have in the bottom to cover your little weaving piece for the thread, that the beads aren't going to stick up over top of that element. So that was something I kind of forgot when I was moving along there, and I think I added more than I should have on the far right once I was done. But you can see here it's really easy just to, once I get about 8 to 10 beads on, I just weave it up and into the next little notch, and then thread on some more until you just keep doing that back and forth until you've got them all weaved on. And then you can see the element slide. I do recommend keeping your thread shorter than going long, just so it doesn't tangle in the process. All right, so I'm adding more adhesive over top of the little weaving piece, and then that will allow me to adhere my little stitch till element piece. Again, you can see on the right hand side there I have quite a few beads. They'll stick up over top when I have the all the beads to the bottom, but that's okay, it's not a big deal. I'll get over it. Then I adhere my little elements, my little characters on. I recommend doing that beforehand, and I also use some Versamark and some teardrop pieces or rain stamps on the background with some clear embossing. I did that before I started weaving. I thought that would add a little bit of interest to the card as well. And then you can see there that it looks like it's raining. It's hard to show with Slimline cards as our field of vision is very limited. So I'm trying to make sure that you can see that when you tip it, it rains. And yeah, I think it looks really cute. Again, I stepped up the envelope by using my Xyron sticker maker with some of the extra elements and some stamping And that finishes off our last card. Here's a closer look at all the cards that we did today and their envelopes. I just think this one is so much fun and so unexpected. I hope the recipient likes it. Let's take a look at the rest of the cards we made. This is the Friends at First Sip for My Favorite Things. I have a very special friend in mind that I would like to send this off to. Then we have our Lawn Fawn Fairy Friends window die cut card. Again, another fun card. Then we have our Saddle Up and Celebrate from My Favorite Things. Again, stepping up the envelope. I hope this has inspired you to make your own Slimsational Slimline cards. And let's take a look at all the cards that we did together. Remember to hop along with us over at the Scrap and Stamp blog. I'll make sure that the links are down below and over on my blog post. As always, you can find the materials used in today's video down below in the description and over at my blog. Any purchases made through these links helps me to bring you future content and tutorials at no extra cost to you. Another way you can show your support is simply by liking, sharing, and subscribing so as not to miss any future posts. Thanks again, until next time, P.S. I love you.